Good morning, everyone. I'm so glad that you could join me this morning. My name is Miss Bartlett, and today we are going to learn about geography. So, what is geography? Geography is the study of characteristics of our world, and not only the characteristics of our world, but also how we as people interact with the world around us. So, what are characteristics of our world? What exactly does that mean? So, let's say we have a mountain. That's a characteristic of the world. Just like if you look at my face, you see my eyes are on my face. My eyes are a characteristic of my face. Just like a mountain or a beach would be a characteristic of our world. Now, part of studying geography is also about studying maps and knowing good directions. Have you ever looked at a map and thought that it looks like a bunch of jumbled up crossed lines and that there are some weird symbols on it that make it more confusing? Well, today we're going to go through some of those symbols and make it easier to read a map. Some of the symbols on a map are called a compass rose and a map legend, and those are two things that we are going to learn about today. So before we start jumping into the symbols on a map, I want to go over what it means to identify characteristics of the world. So, like I said, my eyes are a characteristic of my face. A mountain is a characteristic of the world. So, some things that make a mountain stand out and make it a characteristic are that it is tall and points towards the sky. There are also trees on the side of the mountain, but the higher you get, the colder it is. So, there's not so many plants up at the top. A mountain is much different than another characteristic of the world, like a rainforest. Behind me is a picture of a rainforest, and it is a lot different than a mountain. So while the mountain is tall and reaches up towards the sky, a rainforest is on the ground and it has a lot of trees throughout the entire thing, whereas on a mountain, the higher you get, the less trees there are. So in the rainforest, it rains a whole lot. And in rainforest, it's warm, where on lots of mountains, it's really cold. These are two very different places on the earth, but they still are parts of the earth, just at different places. So part of learning about geography is learning about how we interact with the earth as well. Ways that humans have interacted with the earth is by building cities on top of it. So as you can see, there's a whole lot of buildings in this picture behind me. You've probably been to a city or might even live in one. So humans built these from metal and glass and all kinds of things. Now, ways that a city is different from the mountain and rainforests are that it's not quite all nature. There's a lot less trees and a lot less wide open spaces than there are out in the wild. And this is one way that humans have affected the geography of the planet because they changed the planet by adding things like skyscrapers to it. Now that we've looked at some of the characteristics that make up different parts of the planet, let's look at a map. So here's a map up on the screen. It might look a little bit confusing. It kind of just looks like a big blob with a bunch of different colors in it. You might be wondering, how on earth would I figure out how to get from one place to another by looking at that? And that's a really good question. So let's take a look at the two keys that we have on this map that help tell us where we need to go. Do you see where I put the big red circle around the smaller yellow and pointy circle? That yellow pointy circle is called a compass rose. You may notice that it has 4 letters around it. It has an N, an E, an S, and a W. These letters stand for north, east, south, and west. And if you have a compass at home or have ever seen one on TV, you know that they'll point you in the direction that you need to go. And you may have even heard Siri in your mom's car say to go north whenever you're heading to the grocery store. So the compass rose is always going to be the same. The N is always going to point up. The E is always going to point to the right. The S is always going to point down. And the W is always going to point to the left. These help us know directions when we're telling someone where we need to go. Now I've drawn a circle on the other side of the map. In this rectangle, there's a word at the top. It says key, and it has a bunch of different little symbols on it with words next to them. While this map calls it a key, this is also called a map legend. A map legend is kind of like a super secret code that lets us know what the map is showing us. On the key, I just put a black arrow pointing to a green box with a green tree inside. Next to this box, it says forest. Looking at this map legend, or the key, we know that because of the little green box with the tree on it, anything that's green with green trees on it on the map is a forest. Take a moment and see if you can identify where the forest is using the key. All of this green part in the middle is also green with small green trees, which match the box in the key. Since they match, we know that on this map, the green isn't just a blob. We can look at the key and see that it's a forest. Let's try one more. I've put a black arrow next to another box. This box is gray with a tiny house inside of it. The word next to it also says houses. So that means that we're looking for a blob on the map that matches and is also gray with little gray houses. Take a moment to see if you can find little gray houses on the map. Found them! This little gray blob with the gray houses matches the little gray square and little gray house on our key or our map legend. So that's how we know that's where the houses are on the map. For the last part of class, I'm going to walk you guys through an activity. The next time we meet, I want you all to share what you did during this activity. So let's hop right into it. With a piece of paper and some markers or crayons that you have at home, I want you to draw your own compass rose. Remember that north is always at the top, south is always at the bottom, west is always towards the left, and east is always towards the right. Next, I want you to make your own legend. This is how we're going to make our own map. On my map, I decided that I wanted mountains, water, forest, city, and a park. So I made symbols for each one of the things that I wanted on my map. Next, I drew some blobs. These are going to be my very first map. I decided I wanted some blobs to be city, some blobs to be water, and some blobs to be the forest. So, based on the legend that I made and the little symbols I created, I put those into the blobs and made my own map and legend. Here's how I filled in my blobs to match my legend. So remember on my legend, I had the orange triangles for mountains. So over here I know that there are mountains. Here are my green trees to represent the forest, and here are the blue blobs to show that these bigger blobs are water. Down here, the yellow skyscrapers represent a city, and here, the yellow picnic table symbol I made represents my park. So there's my very first map, and I want you guys to do the same thing too, and get creative with the symbols you make for your legend. Remember, here's my legend. You can look at it. You can even do the same one that I've made if you would like. But just remember that each of these symbols represents a certain place or a characteristic on the earth that you are going to show with the map you create. And this map doesn't have to be anywhere in particular. It can just be a random place you make up in your own head. So next time, bring your maps and we'll talk and present about them, and I'll see y'all next time. Good night.